Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. قد أهلك به أكثر العالم وقد سلمت المدارس لأقوام قل من الله خوفهم وضعفت في الدين بصيرتهم وقويت في الدنيا رغبتهم واشتد على الاستتباع حرصهم ولم يتمكنوا من الاستتباع وإقامة الجاء إلا بالتعصب فحسنوا ذلك في صدورهم ولم ينبهوهم على مكايد الشيطان فيه بل نابوا عن الشيطان في تنفيذ مكيدته فاستمر الناس عليه ونسوا مهمات دينهم فقد هلكوا وأهلكوا فالله تعالى يتوب علينا وعليهم. So this, I really liked this section here. Basically, Imam Ghazāli, he says that he said this is a great entrance that the shaitan utilizes, and he says that the shaitan utilizes, and he used this to destroy al-alam. He used this means to destroy the world. And what is this? He says, وَقَدْ سُلِبَتْ الْمَدَارِسِ لِأَقْوَامٍ قَلَّ مِنَ اللَّهِ خَوْفَهُم. He said the schools have been handed over to those individuals who have little fear of Allah. وَضَعَفَتْ فِي الدِّينِ بَصِيرَتُهُم. And these individuals don't have insight into the religion. Right? And continue listening to this. And he says, though whose insight who has grown weak and whose desire for the present world has become intense, and whose greed to gain followers has grown strong. They have been unable to gain following and influence except through ta'assub, except through partisanship. They have only managed to veil themselves from this fact, not reminding their followers of the deceptions of the shaitan, but instead have become his vehicles. Yani meaning the shaitan is using them. Men have flamed this partisanship, وَنَسَوْا مُهِمَّاتِ دِينِهِمْ, and they forgot the basics of the religion. They perished, فَقَدْ هَلَكُوا, they perished, وَأَهْلَكُوا, and they caused others to perish. فَاللَّهُ تَعَالَى يَتُوبُ عَلَيْنَا وَعَلَيْهِمْ, and may Allah forgive us and forgive them. What is he saying here? And who is he talking to specifically? He's talking to the ulama. And remember, when did Ghazāli die? 505 Hijri. He's talking about this problem, same problem that we face today, 900 years ago. Who does he have a problem with? The scholars. He has a problem with the clergy class. And this is the same thing that we complain about today. And look at how he describes them. He says that all of these madaris, these schools, are being headed by people who do not fear Allah or have little fear of Allah. And we complain about the same exact thing today. He also says, وَضَعَفَتْ فِي الدِّينِ بَصِيرَتُهُم, that they don't even have insight into the religion. They have a weak insight to the religion. Is this something that we hear about today? Do we hear about people having problems with the scholars today? Why? He mentions the reasons very clearly. So. He says their deen is weak and their raghbah, their drive for the dunya is more. But can the layperson see this? Maybe? So I think this is a good question. Can the layperson see this? When Ghazāli here, he's talking about the clergy class. He's saying that these individuals, they have little fear of Allah. They have little insight to the deen, to the religion. And these are the ones heading the schools. These are the ones that are heading the schools. And they are more driven toward the dunya. These people have more drive to the dunya. And they want people to follow them. They want people to follow them. They're looking for people to follow them. And these individuals, they're not able to get people to follow them except through what? through ta'assub. The only way people will follow them is if they call people to what? Not to Allah, but to what? To their madrasa. And again, فَحَسَّنُوا ذَلِكَ فِي صُدُورِهِمْ, and they think that they're doing what? They think they're doing good. By them calling to their madrasa, they feel in their hearts and in their chest that they're actually doing something good. وَلَمْ يُنَبَّهُمْ عَلَى مَكَايِدِ الشَّيْطَانِ فِيهِ, and they don't understand that this is actually one of the ploys of the shaitan. And he goes on to say, بَلْ نَابُوا عَنَ الشَّيْطَانِ فِي تَنْفِيذِ مَكِيدَتِهِ, that the shaitan is actually using them as vehicles, as a means to get what he wants. In this situation, what is it that the shaitan wants? What is the problem here? What is the issue? التعصب. Why is ta'assub a problem? Right. Remember, we had talked about one of the biggest issues and one of the biggest problems Ghazāli discusses is the veil. And one of the hardest things to remove is this veil. So we're constantly looking through this. And what is the problem here? We actually think it's for what? We think it's for the deen. And look at the ploys, look at the tactics of the shaitan. And we had mentioned this before, and it was a little bit before you guys came. Who is he talking about here? He's talking about the ulama, he's talking about the clergy. Look at the problem that he's having. Look at his complaint. And we don't have much difference today. Wallahi, we have the same complaint today. But instead of us calling to Shafi or Hanbali or Maliki, this is not the problem we have today. What is the problem we have today? We have the same thing. These same people are writing these same madaris. What are the madaris that we have today? If you're from Qaraween, if you're from Azhar, if you're from Qura, if you're from Medina, if you're from Dioband, if you're from Tarim, the same exact issues we face today. And this all of this leads to ta'assub, all of it. Because you're no longer calling to Allah, but you're now calling to your madrasa, you're now calling to your school. So the question we have now is how can we tell if a scholar is being sincere? I had a brother ask me this question one time. He's like, Sheikh, there's so many speakers out there. There's so many ulama, so many mashayikh. And now with YouTube and SoundCloud and podcast, we're just flooded with information. How do I distinguish? As a ammi, as a lay person, as a lay Muslim. Uh-huh.
Consistent with the Quran and the Sunnah.
Uh-huh.
Consistent with the Quran and the Sunnah, and it doesn't. They're not busy. They don't busy themselves with others.
Okay, I like the second part. So the first part, is there any group who doesn't call to the Quran and the Sunnah? Is there any group of Muslims that say, no, we don't call to the Quran and the Sunnah, but we want you to listen to us? Is there any group that says this? I don't care how extreme the sect is. Even the Muslim philosophers, like they're the far left, like these are the most far left. Do they say that we don't follow the Quran and the Sunnah? No, hasha. Even they claim to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. There's no ta'ifa min tawa'if al-Muslimin. There's no sect from the Muslim sects that says we don't, you know what, the Quran, Sunnah, you just got to follow me. And what I have to say. Nobody says that. Nobody claims that. But the second part, what you said is important. They don't what? They don't spend their time with others and against others. Why is that important? But it is, the Quran Sunnah la shak is a condition. There's no doubt about that. I agree with that. That's the Quran Sunnah according ala fahmi ana. Right? And sometimes we use very romantic phrases, right? Just follow the Quran and the Sunnah ala tariqat al-salaf. Like, mean salaf? Ana. Like, who is the salaf me? in my understanding, and my sheikh. طيب. What about these scholars who preceded, who are earlier? No. They're not on the way of the Salaf. Okay, Habibi, طيب. As you like. But everybody's trying to follow the Quran and Sunnah, right? Anybody, there's any Muslim wants to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. On a very fundamental level, we all love Allah, we love His Messenger, and we all want to follow their way. But again, why is it important to follow people who don't spend their time against other people or talking about other people, or saying that no, you can't go sit with him because he's from he's from what was it, the party of Dajjal? Or you can't follow him because he's mubtadi'. Or you can't follow him. No, he's on a different madhab. You can't sit with him. You're going to be confused. These are all different. No, Yahi, you have to protect your aqidah. Like, I've heard all of these things. Why are these things problematic? Or are they okay? Is it okay? How do I protect my deen? How do I know who to take from? Or did Allah give us a religion that I'm going to be lost in the world? Is that possible? That Allah would give us a religion that I just get lost? Like, oh Allah, I don't know who to follow. And I'm going to stand in front of Allah and say, Ya Allah, I didn't know who to follow. Is Rabbuna kida? Is our Lord like that? No, abadan, hasha, abadan. There's no way. It is impossible for me to believe Allah put me on this earth without a way of me getting guidance. I can't believe that. And I won't believe that. But He gave me tools. Yes or no? He gave me tools. What are those tools? You mentioned an important point. And someone who doesn't speak about other people. Why is that important? So everybody who speaks about Islam is good? Hey, I asked a really tough question, huh? Everybody that speaks about Islam is good. Even non-Muslims. No. How do I determine who's right and who's wrong? How do you know I'm right? Who?
That's it. Yeah.
How do I know where do I get guidance from? Well, there's no doubt guidance is from Allah. But who of His slaves can I listen to and who can I follow? Can I share some of my thoughts and then you guys can maybe chime in? So when a brother asked me this question, he said, there's multiple shuyukh online and on YouTube, and I don't know who to listen to. So I said to him, why don't you listen to the one who brings the people together? And the one who separates the people, he is somebody I would avoid. And I said the reason for that, because the prophetic message is what? Is to bring people together. I was countered by this one time. If the people love someone, this was the counter argument that I received. If the people love someone, that means he's telling them what they want to hear. I've heard this counter argument too. What do you guys think about that? I personally think it's very challenging, because if you have 10 people in a room, 10 people means they're 10 different things. And it's not possible that I please all of those people. And in general, from what I've seen, if the people like someone, then there's probably a good chance that the person was good. My example, the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, like vast majority of people, A'immat al-Muslimin, right? The Imams of the Muslims. Did they say everything that the people wanted to hear? No, but the people still what? They still listen to them and they still like them. They still love them. Even some of the things that they said they hated, but the person they love. So Allahu A'lam, I think this is a good mi'yar. I think this is a good way of kind of distinguishing and determining what somebody's on. It's somebody who brings the hearts together. Because this was the prophetic message, to bring the hearts together, not to split the hearts apart. Because it's very dangerous. Allah is very dangerous, it's anti-Islamic. How do we bring the people's hearts together?
First of all, looking at their need, which is like the community,
Yeah.
looking at the need, and just calculating what is actually what the community needs, rather than spending time in what.
Okay.
Or not to go on the gray zones, yeah. Stick on.
Sure. So what are the things? What are community needs? Most communities are very similar in terms of their basic needs. What are the needs of the community? What are the major problems in the community? If we summarize the problems, what are some of the problems that we face or we see in our communities? We don't trust one another. I definitely agree with that. How do we fix that? And what do we call that, essentially? Isolation, sure. But it shows that we as a community have a problem in our khuluq. It means we have a problem in our mannerisms. And if I don't reach out to somebody, because in order to trust someone, what do I need to do? It means I need to make myself vulnerable, right? That's how trust is gained. That I have to put myself in an uncomfortable situation in front of someone, or I have to share something that I probably normally wouldn't share. And it doesn't have to be something big. I might go up to someone and be like, can I get a ride? My car broke down. Did I have to ask him? No, but I put myself in a vulnerable situation. And if he gives me the ride, what happens to our relationship now? Right, it gets a little bit stronger. And now, before I didn't know him, but now I can say now I trust him a little bit, right? And the more we give and take with each other, the more we can build that trust. Osman says to me, he's like, Sheikh, can I borrow $20? I'm like, yeah, sure. I give him $20. He comes back to me a couple of days later and he says, Sheikh, listen, I didn't forget. I just don't have the cash right now. I'll get it to you. What's going to happen in my heart? And this is before I went to him. I didn't go to him yet to ask him for the money. He came to me first. And he said, hey, listen, I'll get the money to you. I didn't forget. I'll feel relaxed. Did he lose my trust yet? No, he didn't. Look how easy it is to build trust with one another. And we just have to put ourselves into situations where we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with each other. And this is exactly what khuluq is. And how we deal with one another, how we act with one another, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in front of one another. How did the Prophet ﷺ force these relationships? Or how did he force that building of trust? What did he do? Ahsant. He had the mu'akha system. What was the mu'akha system? After hijrah, what did he do? Right, he paired a muhajir with an ansari. And what was the relationship of these two people? No, before. Some of them could have been. Some of them could have been. But in general, they're strangers. They're like, these individuals are complete strangers to one another. They didn't know each other. Like, they didn't know who one another was. How did they build the trust? How did these two people now, these two strangers, how did they build their trust? Not just by living, like by actually showing that they cared for one another, by offering things to one another, right? And what was the most extreme example that we have? Right, even saying, you can choose which wife you want, and I'll divorce her, and you can marry her. Right? This is the extreme is probably not a good word, but this is like the most. Like it's the most unusual, like involved example of this. Like he was willing to literally go half and half on everything. The Prophet ﷺ said, hey, listen, you guys need to go half and half. He took it to the furthest understanding and said, okay, the Prophet ﷺ is telling me to do it. I'm going to make this happen. And I'm going to give everything. And how did the muhajir respond? He made dua for him. And he said what? He said, show me, dullani ala as-suq. He said, just show me where the market. He said, listen, the only thing I need from you is just show me where the marketplace is. But how do you think he felt when he was offered all those things? Right? He felt very thankful. He was like, man, this complete stranger. And how often these small, like that wasn't a small gesture, but I'm saying just small gestures, how much of an impact do they have on our hearts? Like even the Prophet ﷺ, he reminded us, and he said, "Ibtisam fi wajhi akhik sadaqah." Right? Because giving somebody something, what happens to the other person? There's joy in their heart. They feel happy. And this is the job of the Muslim. This is what khuluq is, ya ikhwan. When we walk into a setting, when we walk into a situation, the people in that situation, they're happy and they look forward to see us. But unfortunately, now, how many of the Muslims, even when we have them walking into our stores or walking into our homes, moving into our neighborhood, what happens? Yeah, right. We have the apprehension, like, oh man, right? Like we don't look forward to it. It's not something that we're happy about. Why? Is the problem with us? Like, so is it a problem to have that feeling? Right, the trust has been broken. Right, the trust has been broken in many communities. And how many of us have had bad experiences with a Muslim convenience store, or a Muslim mechanic, or a Muslim lawyer, or a Muslim doctor, Muslim dentist, Muslim masjid? Like, you know what I mean? Like Muslim scholars. Ghazāli himself was fed up. These things happen. Why? Why does it hurt more when Muslims do it? Huh? Well, tassub is part of it, but even deeper. Expectations, right? When a Muslim does something wrong, it hurts more because from him, I was expecting what? I was expecting more. But when a non-Muslim does it, if a non-Muslim steals or does, what do I think in my heart? I was like, he's not Muslim anyway, right? You know, he doesn't have those same standards that Muslims do. Like, but how do I justify it for the Muslims? It's very difficult. Well, it's our hearts, they're always at battle with that situation. And it's very unfortunate. You know, one of the first things I tell a person who converts to Islam, there's a big difference between Muslims and Islam. And I said, listen, I have to be very honest with you. There are Muslims who lie. There are Muslims who steal. There are Muslims who cheat. There are Muslims who will try to take advantage of you. But you will find everything you want and you're looking for in Islam, not necessarily the Muslims. And it's a reality. I mean, even from at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, were there companions who sinned? Of course, it wasn't a perfect society. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form. They had their shortcomings, they had their deficiencies. Even after the Prophet ﷺ died, it didn't take very long. Hurub al-Ridda started immediately. A few years later, they went to civil war. I mean, it wasn't a perfect society. And they're more sincere than us, no doubt. But the reality is, the Muslims throughout history, from the inception until now, have had problems and they've had issues. It doesn't mean Muslims are bad as a whole. There's still khair in barakah in the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But this is a problem that we really need to work on. In the ummah today, alhamdulillah, we do have there is a sense of unity. I can go to Eritrea, I can go to Pakistan, Indonesia, Russia, France, Mexico. If there's a masjid and it's time for salah, is anybody going to stop me from coming in? No, you're Pakistani. No, this is for Mexicans only. Or no, this is for Kenyans only. Is there any masjids like that? No, alhamdulillah. In Ramadan is coming up. It's around the corner. Allahumma ballighna. I mean, but like it's just right around the corner. I can go to those same masajid, and iftar time, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to invite me in. They're going to be like, no, you, I don't think so. Like, right? It doesn't work like that. Even with the zakat, while we might have some problems in distribution, we might have some problems, and not because of ta'assub or these other things, but do we have problems in collection? So if someone says this is going to go to the black community or the Mexican Muslim community or this community, will the Muslims say, oh no, I don't want to give? No, alhamdulillah. This is not an issue. This is not a problem. And even for Hajj, other than political reasons, is there anybody barred from making Hajj? No. It's only political reasons. It's not even issues of like, you know, because you're from here or you're from there. So there is a sense of unity we do need to be proud of, and we do need to accept. There's no doubt. But the problem is in our social interactions and our social dealings, wallahi, we haven't done well at all. We've really fallen apart. We've really fallen back. So this is one issue, and I thought was really important. I really liked Ghazāli's take on this. The other one is this one sounds familiar too. He says, أن يشغل الإنسان عن نفسه بالاختلافات الواقعة بين الناس في المذاهب والخصومات. He says here that people busy themselves with what? Differences of opinion. They busy themselves with modern differences of opinion, and then what do against each other? They start arguing. Sound familiar? This advice, remember, this advice is 900 years old. He's complaining of the same thing that we are facing today. That we are still bickering. This is basically, if you want to ask a summary of this, he said we're still bickering. We're still arguing over these small things. And is that, we should be worried about, should I be worried about things that are halal and haram? Absolutely. This is whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited, I need to stay away from. Whatever He made permissible, I can take advantage of. But why is this problem? Why is bickering an issue? Where's the problem here? Okay, it causes division, good. But there's even a more basic problem. Okay, it's part of arrogance, right? Putting other people down. And fundamentally, where's the issue here? Where's the problem here? Okay, good. Right, again, part of arrogance, right? This is part of arrogance. Very basically here, am I allowed to enforce my opinion on other people? Why am I bickering? Why am I fighting? Because I want to enforce my opinion on someone else. Like, if I think buying a house from a conventional bank in America is haram, don't. I support you. I think that's great. You need to do just like what I need to do to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you feel that this is the way to do it, go for it. Is he now allowed to tell somebody who thinks it's not, who thinks it's permissible? Is he allowed to enforce that on him now? Everybody needs to make their individual decisions. And at the end of the day, you can go to 5 different imams and you'll get 5 different fatwa. Which fatwa do I follow? Forget bickering. I'm talking about me as an individual. I'm me, layperson. I go to Sheikh Miguel, and then I go to Sheikh Uthman, and I go to Sheikh Sulaiman, and then I go to Sheikh Muhammad, and I go to Sheikh Mu'adh, and I don't know your name, Akhi, I'm sorry. Bara. I go to Sheikh Bara. Now I have 6 opinions in front of me. How do I choose? Huh? I think we need to go back to the previous point, right? How do I choose? I'm asking, like, as a lay Muslim, what do I do?
You pick the one that's coincides with your context.
Okay. What if it's difficult for me to even determine that?
Whatever sentence gives me that.
Ahsant. Right? Whatever brings me tala'ani. This is something the Prophet ﷺ very specifically told us. Because he says, what does he say about iman? He said, ma haka fi sadr. Right? That which gnaws at your hearts, which pulls at your heartstrings. You know in your heart that this is the one, this is the right one. Islamically, can I have 6 muftis and 6 correct opinions? Yes, absolutely. But is every one of those correct opinions for me? No. There's only going to be one that my heart leans toward and is comfortable with. And I know that I'm going to stand in front of Allah with. هذا هو التقوى. This is taqwa. That regardless of what anybody says to me, and even the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked the same question, what did he say? How did he answer? He said, Istafti qalbak. He said, ask your heart. You know. You already know. Even before probably you heard all these answers, you already knew in your heart what your decision was. Now, is it possible that some shaykh will give more insight and more, and you didn't realize before? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's fine. This is why we ask. This is why we go to the ulama. This is why we get fatwa, so we can get clarification and guidance. But at the end of the day, even that iktishaf, even that discovery, what's going to happen? Either your heart is going to accept it or reject it. And that hadi diyana. This is what deen is. This is how I draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Through those things that Allah has given to me and provided for me. I have to make that decision. So bickering, it's a big problem. It's a big issue. SubhanAllah, it's amazing how a lot of these issues, and I know me, Uthman, and Miguel have talked about this a lot, how a lot of these things revolve around kibr. A lot of these things, they revolve around arrogance. So these are just the two I really liked. Like these 2 points that Ghazāli had mentioned, I really enjoyed, and I just wanted to share them with you. Inshallah, we'll talk about, we'll get into chapter 13 today. Any questions before we begin? Before we get into the chapter? Yeah, it's fadl.
So whatever the video says, I see what mine is wrong.
Yeah.
Which is guided.
Yeah.
And,
MashaAllah.
I don't, that my brother should be on that time.
Yes.
So how can I?
MashaAllah. No, Jay, that's a good question. So the thing is, how do I advise someone? Basically, right? In summary, how do I advise someone? If I feel somebody's doing something wrong, how do I advise them? How would we want to be advised? I think it's a very reasonable way of dealing with it. If somebody felt I was wrong, what's the best way to approach me? Okay, and number one, I think the most important thing to understand is those things which are muttafiq alayh. يعني بين جميع الطوائف المسلمين, like these are things that I have to approach someone on. So what are the things I have to approach another Muslim on? Okay, yeah, I'm kind of, I don't really care for that one too much, man. Yeah. So Uthman said, "Ma'lum al-Dīn min al-Darūra," like, basically necessary knowledge. Like it becomes very subjective and contextual. Like it's just so, it's so abstract. Yeah, it's like a theoretical state. And I mean, if I'm talking to someone at that point, it's not going to be like, have you read the Quran? Like, what have you been taught? Like, so let's talk even amongst ourselves. What are things that us as Muslims, what do we need to know? What is in Hadith Jibril? Ahsant, right? So what are those things? The 5 pillars of Islam. This is something we all need to know and we all need to accept. So for example, if somebody says to you, outside of these 5 pillars, he says, I don't think having a beard is wajib. I don't think having a beard is an obligation. Is this something that needs to be argued over? Why? Because it's outside of the 5 pillars. And there are a number of things that are obligatory in Islam, outside of the 5 pillars, yes or no? But do all of them deserve that time and attention and arguing? No. If a person said to you, it'd be like, man, I only think there are 4 prayers. I need to talk to him. Man, I think 2.5% is a little high. I think we should drop it down to 2. This is where we need to have a conversation, right? These things are very problematic. Or like, the final message. I understand the Prophet ﷺ is the final messenger, but no, there are no buts. That's it. Like, he's the final messenger. So these 5 pillars for sure, agreed on. These are worth fighting over. These are worth arguing over. These are worth defending. What else? The 6 pillars of Iman. So from the 6 pillars of Iman believing in Dajjal? No. If someone has a problem with it, yes, we can talk to him and have a conversation. But is it a fundamental part of his faith? No, it's not. It's not enough to expel someone. If he has issues with Ya'juj and Ma'juj. I'm being serious. No, I mean, these aren't things that are worth, arguing over. If someone, because you have people who are very rational and you have people who are very abstract. And the idea is like, okay, how are these people within the fold of Islam? And inshallah, we can have a conversation about that. But at the end of the day, again, the 6 pillars of Iman are things that are fundamental.
If somebody saying pillars of Iman are 5, because Allah mentioned in the Quran, 5 in Bukhari, there are 5. In other hadith, the
Which one does? Okay, yeah. So the thing is, I didn't want to get into this too much, but basically they'll say like iman bil qadar yarja ila ilm Allah. So it's not necessary to make it something separate. Yeah. Oh, the number. I mean, the thing is, khair, the number is a bit trivial, but the thing is, at the end of the day, if he believes in qadar, either as a separate category or part of Allah's knowledge, it's the same thing. Does that help? Does that make sense? So you can say 5, but the real reality is qadar when yadkhul iman billah, right? That's it. So if you want to make it 6, then make it separately for emphasis. You can do that because it is. You're just emphasizing the fact that qadar. And why emphasize qadar? Because it's a difficult concept, right? It's difficult for us to understand the reality of qadar. So the Prophet ﷺ, he singled it out and he made it a 6th pillar as min bab tawqid, like as an emphasis. If you remove it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. Why? Because it's a part of Allah's knowledge. So and it would essentially fall under the 1st pillar of iman. And it's just small technicalities. It's not, it's not really a big deal. Because if somebody rejects qadar, then he has a problem. That's where you start getting dangerous. Like even the qadariyah is somebody like the Sahaba, even they did takfir of the qadariyah. So what was the last thing we were talking about? Oh yeah, in the muharramat, right? So if somebody says drinking alcohol is permissible, if somebody says zina is permissible, if somebody says lying is permissible, if somebody says stealing, right? Murder, all of these things, the people who make those things permissible, at that point, these are points that where we can stand hard. Everything else, how do we approach it? So we established the things that we have to be very firm about. All of the other things outside of those, what do we do with those? Does it mean that we don't approach and we don't talk? No, we still should, right? Because they're a Muslim brother and we care about them and we love them. Like someone says, I don't accept that hadith. I think it's all just fabrication. Can I talk to this person? Yeah, I should. Well, I should always try to talk and I should always try to do the best that I can. But there's a difference in having a dialogue and putting someone down. Why do you think that? Yeah, that's interesting. Where'd you get that from? Where'd you read that? And usually you'll find that they'll manage to trap they'll manage to trap themselves. I remember there was a brother who had come to me. He's like, yeah, Sheikh, I don't accept that hadith. I was like, okay. I was like, why? He's like, oh, it was written X amount of years afterward, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. And then he started talking about different, and I was just listening to him. And he started talking about different issues in fiqh. I was like, interesting. Where'd you hear about that? He was like this. I was like, so you take from those books, but you don't take from these books. And he stopped and he was like, oh, I didn't, he didn't even think about it. I was like, Akhi, all of these issues that are extracted in the fiqh books, where do you think they get their information from? Another brother argued with me. He's like, Sheikh Tayyib, what about the roots of these words? And these words actually come from here. And this is what this means in the Quran. And the ayat actually mean this. I was like, mumkin, maybe. I was like, but I disagree. He's like, why? I was like, because the hadith gives us context to that. He's like, yeah, but a hadith, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, how did you get the meanings of these words? Question. How did you know that this is what this word means? Where did it come from? I was like, you went back to the ma'ajim. You went back to the dictionaries. And I said, what's interesting about dictionaries? He's like, what? I was like, they use a hadith. I mean, so the thing is and I don't mean to get into a long, discussion over how to convince someone that you can take from a hadith. But the idea is, there's a difference between rejecting a hadith and rejecting sunnah, right? I think that's an important point too. Rejecting a hadith means what? That I doubt the authenticity. Versus rejecting the sunnah, which means that I doubt the actions of the Prophet ﷺ or his statements or whatever. Nobody rejects the sunnah from the Tawaf al-Muslimin. Like from the Muslimin, nobody rejects. The only ones that doubt the sunnah or doubt the hadith are because of the authenticity of it. That's it. But nobody rejects the sunnah as a whole. Any other questions? How much time do we have? Okay. So in this chapter, he talks about the importance of intention. And we had talked about an individual who is always reanalyzing his intention and always looking back and doing this muraqabah. This is essentially what? Reflection, iman, taqwa. Right? An individual who's constantly questioning himself. And there's a difference between questioning yourself and waswasa. What's the difference? Waswasa is a negative context. There's no doubt. But like these whispering, how do I tell the difference? Like me as an individual, how do I tell the difference between having a healthy doubt of my intention and constantly renewing it and doubting my intention? All right, constant doubt. But shouldn't we technically constantly be doubting? Okay.
Specifically, like salah.
Okay. Maybe. But in general, wallahu alam, in general, just from my experience, is that healthy doubt is before you do the action. Healthy doubt is before you do the action. And waswasa is when? It's like either during or after. Like after is then like, did I, you know what I mean? Did I do this? Did I do that? Did I miss a rak'ah? Did I forget to do my, you know, did I wash my feet? But healthy doubt is always questioning yourself when? Before you actually engage and before you actually do the action. Wallahu alam. So over here, he talks about the stages between thought and action. So Ghazāli says, there's an involuntary suggestion. We had talked about this before, and we said that there are two types. What are they? Shaytani wa maliki, right? So he said that one is from the shaitan and the other one is from an angel. And we said that those are symbolic. Sometimes it can actually be a shaitan and it can actually be an angel, or it can be what? It can be the nafs. Then he said that once you have this involuntary suggestion, you have made, right? You start leaning in one direction. After you have that, you have conviction that, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this. And then finally you have that final determination where you want to carry out the action. So where does accountability apply in this? And Ghazāli will talk about it. Oh, my animation didn't work. but I'll fix it, inshallah. Ala kullin, he says suggestions and inclinations. He says there's no accountability. Why?
Because just no action.
There's no actions, right? These are just they're basically floating thoughts, right? They're still floating thoughts at this point. But he says conviction, when you have azam, he says that there are two. You can either be not accountable or you can be accountable. So you're not accountable when you're forced, when there's compulsion, and you're accountable if you voluntarily decide to go ahead and carry out this action. And finally, you have this determination. He said determination, at this point you are going to be accountable completely, right? There's no compulsion at this stage, at this point, because anything that led to compulsion is what? Is going to be conviction. It's not going to be determination. Does that make sense? Which is why he didn't put compulsion here. And he says here, even with the accountability through the point of the deed, actual deed. I didn't mean to put good deed, but the deed here. Even while you are committing the action, what can happen? Ahsant, right? So during the action, your intention can actually change. And Ghazāli says, in order to protect your intention, what should you do? You make tawbah. And even with the tawbah, what happens to the bad deed? What? It turns into it's converted into a good deed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made all of these means. I mean, He's made all of these means for us to draw near to Him, for us to have a reward in Him. And this is based on the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ talks about Allah, and he talks about when an individual has intention to do something good and when he has intention to do something bad. So what are the four situations? If an individual intends good and he does it, what happens? Multiplied, right? It'll be 10 to 700 times. If he has good deed, if he has good intention and He doesn't do it. What happens? He gets one reward. Like bad deed. He intends to do bad deed, and he does it. What happens? He gets a sin. Bad deed. He doesn't. How does he not to do it? He just thinks it, right? He doesn't act on it. Not that he's prevented, So if he intends to go steal, he gets in his car, he goes to go steal from someone, and he gets into an accident. He'll still be accountable, right? He'll say, why? Because he had full determination. He had full determination to actually carry it out. If you forget, it depends on your conviction, right? If I'm in the middle of going to like rob somebody, and then I forget that I was going to rob him. Maybe. I mean, it could happen, I guess. I don't know. All right. It depends on his conviction, right? And that's something that would be between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even in those situations where you have different types of deeds and different types of rewards, we had mentioned this, for an individual who has a natural inclination toward a particular sin. And if somebody is an alcoholic, and he walks by a liquor store, how is his reward versus somebody who doesn't like the smell of liquor? So the person who has the weakness, his reward is going to be more. And the person who doesn't have a fitna, his reward is going to be less. Right? Is going to be less. Because some people, they just have a natural repulsion, right, to these things. And they don't like them and they don't want to get involved in them. So this is how things are multiplied. So and Ghazāli re-emphasizes this point, right? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, we are not held accountable for our thoughts. There is khilaf on one place. What is that? Where is that place that we are held accountable for our thoughts? وَمَنْ يُرِدْ بِهِ إِلْحَادًا سَنَذُقْهُ عَذَابًا عَلِيمًا. This is talking about Makkah. So this is why Ibn Abbas actually left. and ilhad in this verse, it actually means like the intention to hurt another Muslim. So whoever intends to hurt another Muslim within the haram boundary, within Makkah, he's actually held accountable just for thinking that he wants to hurt another Muslim. But that's the only place that there's khilaf. And that's it. That's the end of the chapter, inshallah. So we'll stop here. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqi nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Any questions?
So we're talking about fatwa, right, in the beginning?
Yeah.
So is fatwa binding?
Fatwa is not binding. Only a hukam is binding. I've had a number of people take fatwa from me and not follow it. and it doesn't hurt my feelings.
Because a lot of times when we impose something on people,
لا إله إلا الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة والسلام. فتوى.
a lot of times when I am trying to impose my will on people,
Yeah.
I'm actually using the fatwa rather than actual hukum.
Okay.
And maybe I declare you whatever I want to declare you.
Can you give me an example, like a specific example?
Example.
Yeah.
Masalan, I have the fatwa of buying a conventional house.
Buying a house on a conventional bone. Okay.
I thought I don't follow that fatwa.
Okay.
But you follow that fatwa.
Okay.
So I say, oh, you misguided, and I want the community about you have plans.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think is stemming that and causing that?
It's of course my arrogance.
Right.
My
It's your nafs, right?
Yeah,
Okay. So, I don't understand the question. Or did you answer your own question?
I just
Or are you planning a protest against me? I don't know. I don't know.
I'm telling you.
It's like this like this guy. He's telling people to take loans to buy a house. No, but like fighting over things where there's a reasonable difference of opinion. Yeah, it's like, so for example, even the definition of riba, right? It's problematic, right? Even the definition itself, like, okay, what if somebody argues, for example, somebody argues and they say, okay, riba, I agree that there's riba. Riba applies to assets and it applies to commodity currency. It doesn't apply to fiat currency. Why? Because the qima of fiat currency is always, it's not just fluctuating, it's usually moving in a downward trend. Yani the dollar I have in January is going to be worth 95 cents in December. So I don't think it applies. Can you say that this person like encourages riba? If somebody came to me and they said, hey, I want to trade gold with with barat. And they say, okay, well, I'll say, the same sheikh will be like, okay, it has to be yadan bil yad. And it has to be the same amount. They're like, yeah, but sheikh, you said for dollars it's okay. Yeah, because dollars is fiat. It's not commodity currency. So this is over here. It becomes an issue of like really understanding what the other fatwa are and having a tolerance for differences of opinion. Because even now, even in this day of age, there's still madaris. There still are. It's just not how it used to be, where you call to the different madhab. Now it's you actually calling to a particular madrasa, or you're calling to a particular majma' fiqhi, or you're calling to your particular, even institution or masjid. Because now you even have, like, I was very surprised, like even in this area, yeah, but Dar al-Hijra gave fatwa. It's become very institutional. So how do you deal with those differences of opinion? We have to bring the people together, man. That's what we do. Is it valid? Does his argument make sense? Walau kana ba'id, even if it's far-fetched. Mumkin, right? And if it's mumkin, then I'm okay. There are certain limits that even there are limits for me where I will highly challenge them. So you have a lot of modern day scholars who are very big into maqasid, right? The objectives of the Sharia, and they'll say the hudud don't apply anymore. They do ta'wil. They say because the maqsad of the Sharia is hifdh al-nafs, and that the haraj that happened during in pre-Islamic, during Islamic times and afterward, that isn't necessary anymore. People learn their lessons by with sijn and uqubat al-maliyah. So that gharad was fulfilled, and we don't need hudud anymore. We don't need capital punishment and corporal punishment anymore. You have people who say this. They say the purpose of hijab was to protect the woman. Now women are generally protected with laws and rules and regulations around the world, so we don't need this anymore. I'm telling you, there are people who say this. Yeah. They say hijab is not wajib. It's not, it's not a thing. Now, will I say these people are Muslim? Yeah, I will. I'm not going to throw them outside the fold of Islam, because remember, we said the 5 pillars of Islam and the 6 pillars of Iman. This is the dabit. This is where we define. Anything other than that, I'll debate you. It doesn't mean I'll accept your opinion. So, like for some people, there's acceptable ta'wil and there's unacceptable ta'wil. Like you can't come to a point to me and be like, because of the maqasid, like we have ways now to keep people from driving and hurting other people when they're drunk, therefore alcohol is fine. Anyway, I'm just giving an example. No, on this point, I'll draw a line and be like, no, this is min al-muharramat allati yani ittafaqat alayha. Like nobody says that this is halal. And going back to the older fatwas, nobody says it in the way that you're saying it. We could talk about like the Kufan opinions, later. Yeah, with Nabid and stuff. But the thing, even for them, even for the Kufans, they allowed it ila hadd sakr. Right? So they said once you get drunk, it's haram. It's not permissible. Before that, fihim khilaf. Yeah, no, it's recording. It's live. No, but we have to be honest with our Islamic history, right? And our tradition. Like these things were part of our history, part of our tradition. It doesn't mean that they were right, because fiqh was still developing. right? It's not, fiqh developed over time. It wasn't something that was like hard line and like, you know, the Prophet ﷺ said, here's umda. You know, like you guys read it, or what's you know what's the word, what's the one that they read, Nur al-Idah, or Safinat al-Najah. Like, you know, these things came much later. You know, these books when fiqh was actually codified. Like this was like proto fiqh, all of these discussions and all of these things. But you know, and may Allah protect us. We have to learn tolerance. Wallahi, we have to learn tolerance. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us tolerant. Ameen. Allahu a'lam, sallallahu ala khayri khalqi nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam. Do we have any questions online? Oh, kibr. Kibr is pride, Jawad. I hope that answers your question. Kibr is pride and arrogance. May Allah protect us.
I actually have a question, quick question.
Sure.
Going back to what you said on basically if you have a lot of different fatwas, you pick the one that pleases your heart the most.
Yes.
How can I make sure that I safeguard myself from following my desires?
I can't dictate and tell that what your desire is. Only you can. And you have to be honest with yourself. And subhanAllah, giving fatwa, when I end with this, and I remind people, I was like, listen, I can share the spectrum of opinions with you. And the reason that I personally share the different opinions is because nowadays people have access to Google. And if I don't tell them the opinions, they don't trust my fatwa and be like, oh, he doesn't know. That's the problem with having access to information. It's good and bad. So when I share them and I say, okay, and this is the reasoning behind the different fatwa. And sometimes they'll be like, okay, Sheikh, but what's your position? They'll ask me. I'll be like, well, this is the one I'm inclined toward. But there are always individual situations that will vary. And being very honest with you, only you know what your specific situation is. I can't dictate that to you. And at the end of the day, I can tell you whatever. You have to stand in front of Allah, not me. Like I studied and I did my ijtihad, khalas, I got my ajr. Like, you know, if I'm right, I got 2. If I'm wrong, I got 1. I said, I'm already in the clear. I said, you are the one that needs to stand in front of Allah with the decision that you make, because you need to ask your heart. And you need to do that which will bring you near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And wallahi, akhi, it weighs on people's hearts. Wallahi, it does. When you give that perspective to people, akhi, the Muslim ummah, ma zalat fi khair. Yani they're still good in the Muslim ummah. And people really take these things seriously. And when you tell them to take a decision like that, people will take the decision seriously. They won't play. Alhamdulillah. Oh, any other questions? No? طيب. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.